Hello and welcome back to my channel. Today we're going to be talking about the viral TikTok series, Who the Fuck Did I Marry? So if you haven't seen this series yet, one, I don't blame you. It is over 50 parts long and Miss Ma'am could have told us who the fuck she married in 10 parts or less. I'm just saying. Although the series is very long, I do think it is very important to not watch. I think it's a very important story, especially for those of us that are single and those of us that are aiming towards marriage and kids and family and all that stuff. Because I feel the main purpose or my main takeaway from the story was that our our storyteller, we're gonna call her Tisa for the sake of the story, um, basically was recalling her relationship, her dating, and then marriage and then divorce of her husband, now ex-husband. Legion is how she refers to him in the videos. And it's a series of red flags, basically. It's a series of him lying and being deceitful, a series of the brightest red flags I've ever seen. And we're not here to judge and we're not here to shame because we've definitely all been there to an extent. I mean, like, there are certain red flags that I just would not, there's no way that I would have overlooked being in her position. But at the same time, I know that there's relationships that I've been in, and there are red flags that you see in hindsight and not necessarily in the moment. But there were some red flags in the moment where I'm like, girl. But also, like I said, there are relationships that I was in. I would be telling my friends, like, yeah, there's this red flag. And they're like, oh no, you got to get the fuck out. I think it's easier for some people that are outside of the relationship to be able to say, why didn't you leave? Why didn't you leave? Why did you stay in that relationship for so long? So I do think that although it was very vulnerable for her to share her story, I think it was really dope that she did because I think it's very telling about the pressures in society that women face when it comes to getting married and having kids, which I'll be honest, I didn't know that that was still a thing. Like I thought we were just like, I thought we were all in our hot girl era. If you want to get married, get married. If you want to do this, do that. You know what I mean? Go off. I didn't realize that there were still women out there, which of course there's always going to be women that are still out there that are willing to settle for the utmost disrespect, utmost deceitfulness. Dude was like literally a pathological liar. So for her instance, it does kind of go above and beyond red flags. But in a nutshell, which I'm going to try to summarize it the best that I can, the initial posting and the initial series in parts, there's about 50 parts, which she could have told us who the fuck she married in 10 parts or less, I feel, in my personal opinion. So I'm going to do my very best to summarize it for you. I did watch all of the parts just because I'm the type of person where I like to see and hear for myself from the person's mouth what has happened. So feel free to watch it for yourself. I recommend speeding it up a little bit. Baby girl is long-winded, as am I. See, I'm digressing right now, so I feel that. So basically, we have Tisa, which is what I'm going to be calling her because I do not know how to pronounce her TikTok username, and she's recalling the dating and marriage that she shared with her now ex-husband. Legion is how she refers to him in the videos, and it starts off somewhat normal. They meet on the Facebook dating website, which I've heard from friends. I don't do the online dating thing because I watch a lot of true crime. I watch a lot of Web of Lies. So that just has never been an option for me. Terrified of getting murdered. And I just don't do it. But from what I hear, Facebook dating is like actually sus as hell and full of questionable people. But nonetheless, this is where Tisa meets Legion. They go on their first date. And it starts off with chaos. Before she could even make it to the date, Tisa's tire blows out in the middle of the highway. And like which it's like and it's another hindsight thing where if there was a sign for you not to go on a date with somebody, that would have been it. That would have been it. But Legion comes to her rescue, buys her a new tire. They go on a date. They establish that they both want marriage, family, and that they both want to be in serious, committed relationships. So moving forward, their relationship progresses very quickly. Legion ends up moving in with Tisa, mostly because she's in a four-bedroom townhouse and he's in an apartment. And at the time of all of this, it was during the pandemic, and so her logic was that she wanted to quarantine with him, which it's like, I get it. You got your rose-colored glasses on. You have a man who wants all the things that you want. So it's like, I could understand her thought process. So as a relationship progresses, there are red flags and there's weird stuff going on. One of them that stands out to me the most was when they begin looking for a house. So Tisa does become pregnant with Legion, and in doing so, they're trying to find a house. They're trying to like move things along as far as how they feel the relationship progress should progress while there's a kid involved, you know? Because as I mentioned, they talked about marriage, they talked about kids, they talked about the whole nine yards basically. And so in looking for a house, she finds out that Legion has a lot of money and been able to get a what was it, $750,000 mortgage loan from his bank. And not only that, but he has like money he's able to pay up front, like hundreds of thousands of dollars to be able to put down on a house up front. So this is what he is saying. Tisa finds a house that she likes. She's talking with the real estate agent, and the real estate agent is like, "Hey, are we gonna get a, do we like the house? Do you plan on buying it?" She's confused because at this point, Legion has confirmed that he's already signed papers and that they're going to be moving into this house. And surprise, surprise, that does not happen. And so it was very excusable at the time for Tisa. In her mind, it was like, okay, it fell through. But in doing more research, she ended up finding out that he had never put anything down on the house and that he lied. And so she's aware now at this point that he has lied. And instead of even calling him out, which she admits herself that she acted very, I guess you could say selfishly. She acted very, um, what is the word that I want to use for this? It's not good. She basically ignored the lie and ignored the fact that she had solid proof that he straight up lied to her face about the situation, and stayed because she was like, okay, he's paying my bills. And she did specify in the videos that he wasn't paying for all of her bills, but just for like the housely stuff. So it's like her car note, things like that, she was taking care of, but he was handling like the electricity bill, the water bill, the gas bill, like that type of thing. And so by her being pregnant and by her having some of her yeah, I don't know what that was, sorry. And by having some of her uh, bills off of her plate, she felt that it was better for her to stay in that relationship, which, like I said, she was able to admit herself that this was some questionable behavior. But for me, it's I wish she would have dug into that a little bit further. Just because the second somebody starts lying to you about things like that, about finances, about really anything, there's cute little white lies that a man might tell. Like, oh, I'm 6'1", he's 5'11". Like, it's like those aren't super fucking crazy to me, but like fundamental important things, especially when it comes to eventually getting married and sharing finances and like tying everything together to where two now becomes one. I think it's important to be truthful and honest about those types of things. So moving forward, the lies just get progressively worse. And as I mentioned, for her, it was more of hindsight. There was a lot of things that she didn't find out until after the divorce. And of course, while Tisa is in this relationship with Legion, her logic for the most part wasn't um oh, he would be lying about this, because there were things that he was lying about that you would think nobody would be lying about. For instance, family members dying, children dying, how his last marriage went. Like, he lied about everything. And I think honestly that's scary as fuck. As soon as I catch somebody in the first lie, I feel like she should have either confronted the lie or moved away from the situation entirely. Just because I watch a lot of true crime, so anytime there's a slightest bit of lie or the slightest bit of dishonesty, I'm terrified and I have checked out. So as I mentioned, Tisa was pregnant. She ends up losing the baby, unfortunately, which honestly, like, that in itself is just, it's sad. Like, she was just going through a lot, I feel, mentally, when dealing with somebody that you're supposed to, have all of your trust in, dealing with that. And not to mention, he wasn't really present during the time that she was going through all of that. So it was just a lot. And there was one lie in particular that kind of terrified me. So Tisa in the 50 parts recalls him every morning getting on the phone and talking with his brother. And she said she could hear the conversation, but she could only hear his end of the conversation. Because, it's a phone call. You can only hear, usually, unless somebody is on speaker or the volume is loud enough, you're only going to hear the person who's physically there. You're only going to hear that side of the conversation. So she said that this man was having 30 to 40-minute phone conversations with his brother. Y'all, he wasn't. There was nobody on the other line. We find this out because she ends up speaking to his family at the end of everything, at the end of the divorce, or I guess the start of the divorce. She finally gets her answers on all the things that he was lying about, that being one of them. So come to find out, he's estranged from most of his family because of his lying habits, and it was just bad. And that was another thing too that I feel like is important, because I feel like this was truly a cautionary tale, and I think there's so much that we can learn from Tisa's story. But not only that, prior to the divorce, she finds out that he has also been messaging women, sending them inappropriate photos, inappropriate sexual photos of himself, exchanging those. He at one point hires a sex worker for sex acts, and she's like uncovering all of this stuff. And around that point is when she's reached her boiling point, and she finds out about his multiple infidelities. She finds out he's cheated and is basically opts out of the marriage and requests for a divorce, and that's where she gets all of her answers. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Some of the other things that he lied about how much money he had. He lied about how his divorce went down. So Legion claimed that he was previously married to a woman, and the woman cheated on him, and he broke up with her, but he stayed really close with her children, that she had from a previous marriage. And at one point he lies and says that her daughter, his ex-wife's daughter, Legion's ex-wife's daughter, who was once his stepdaughter, passed of COVID. And when Tisa speaks to his ex-wife, the ex-wife is like, yeah, my daughter's fine. Like, because for further context, Tisa ends up contacting his ex-wife looking for more answers, and by this point they're already married. And I say, anytime that you feel the need to do additional research, that should have been done at the start. That should have been done at the very beginning. That should have been done like at the top of the relationship, at the top of whenever she felt that things were off, because it's not common, I feel, for anybody to reach out to their current partners, past partners, if everything's going fine. You don't have the inclination to do that. So there were things, like I said, that were just completely out of her control, and then there were some things where it was like, I feel that she acted and responded very selfishly. Like I mentioned before, she caught him in a blatant lie, and instead of leaving, she felt like, okay, my bills are getting taken care of, so I'll just ignore it. Like, I already know he's gonna lie to me about this, I'll just ignore it. My bills are getting handled, which to me is not the way that you should be thinking at all in a relationship, which I feel like it's also very telling too about marriages and relationships now, which is why I have mixed feelings about marriage to begin with. Just something about it at times seems very transactional. It seems a lot more transactional. You ready to get down? Hold on. Be free, my child. She's tired. Something about marriage that just seems a lot more transactional than it does about being in love and being bonded to somebody spiritually and lovingly and emotionally. But basically, Legion lied about everything. And like I said, in Tisa's defense, the things that he was lying about, you would never guess anybody in their right mind would be lying about that type of shit. Like family members dying, children dying, like nobody in their right mind would lie about that. And there's certain things that me as a person, I'm not gonna push on it. Like, if you choose to lie about some shit like that, that's on you, and that's for you to deal with your karma, and so on and so forth. After everything was said and done, Tisa is able to talk to Legion's family. They actually reach out to her because they're like, we didn't even know he was married. We didn't even know that you existed. Now all of a sudden he's coming to us telling us that you cheated on him and he left you, and you cheated on him with the cop, and the cop pulled a firearm on him. Like, just bombastic lying, like the most outrageous lying you've ever heard. And luckily for Tisa, his family was already privy to his lying habits, and so luckily they were able to help her kind of clear things up and kind of figure out where the lies started, the truth stopped and the lies begin. And it was there from the very beginning. There was hardly any truth to anything that this man had ever told her. And like I said, in certain instances that Tisa was in, I could completely understand the situation that she was in. And then there are other instances where I'm like, okay, what are we doing? What the fuck are we doing? And like I said, this is no room to judge. And I'm glad that she did share this story. And I'm glad that she was able to reflect on herself in hindsight to be able to say, Like, I was so caught up in wanting to be married and having a family and finding my person and settling down that I overlooked a lot of red flags. Kind of scary to me that that happened to the extent that it happened. Um, just because I feel like, although I'm pretty sure that is a very traumatic experience for her, having somebody lie to that degree is, I wouldn't trust anybody ever again. Um, However, I do feel like if she took the initiative and wasn't thinking, which is like, it's not on her. It really, I don't put all of my blame on her because I understand that society for a really long time put so much pressure on women to get married, for women to be valued in marriages and family, and that pressure for women has always been there. So it's like, I get that. But we gotta cut that shit out because it's like, at what point do you say, hey, this person is lying to me, this person is disrespecting me, I need to leave, I need to get out of this situation? Like, at what point do we say that? Because, like I said, there was a lot of people that had listened to her story. Daphne, don't eat that. No, Mija. There was a lot of people that had listened to her story and that, just stop it. There was a lot of people that had listened to her story and felt nervous or felt anxious about the relationships that they were currently in, which, yes and no. I feel like her case was very particular, unless you're just flat out dealing with a pathological liar and just don't know it, and you choose to ignore all the red flags, which is why I say this is definitely a cautionary tale. Because in her point of view during that time, like I said, for her it was like definitely a hindsight thing. Like, she knew that he was lying, she knew that he was being deceitful, she just didn't know to what extent. I still feel like, why are we tolerating any sort of lies, any sort of deceitfulness at all though? Like, I feel like, to want to be married that badly where you're able to say, okay, yeah, I already know he's gonna lie to me about this, like, I'm just gonna shut up about it though, for the sake of not being alone and for the sake of making this work, is scary. That's very scary to me. Because imagine if there were, if I just imagine in certain situations, like, specifically true crime situations where people are like not getting hurt emotionally but like physically getting hurt and physically putting themselves in harm's way. I imagine those situations where women have overlooked small little lies and proceeded on with their marriages and relationships, and it resulted in the worst case scenario. And I'm not saying that's what women that are in relationships or all women deal with from day to day. Like, I feel like more commonly it's just assholes that lie about cheating and that lie about things that Legion was lying about in the story. I mean, like, aside from death, like, I know assholes that wouldn't touch on that wouldn't lie about somebody else's child passing, that wouldn't lie about family members passing. There's levels to this shit. And I think that's why she was so shocked at the end of their relationship when she found out, like, the extent that he was lying. And if you're going through a situation like this, or you're in a position similar to Tisa, where a lot of the time too, she had mentioned she was questioning herself and was unsure, like, maybe I'm crazy, maybe I'm tripping. But if it's at a point where you're doing background checks on your partner after y'all got married, I think it's time to wrap that shit up, full stop. And I know for her, there was also a religious aspect involved where she was concerned about ending her marriage. Like, the first time she found out that he had cheated, which your definition of cheating can vary, but this was before she found out about the sex worker. He was sending photos of himself and receiving photos from another woman, being very sexual towards this woman over DMs. And so instead of looking at that as, okay, as a full-blown deception, she was like, okay, like, let's go to marriage counseling for this. They found a pastor and his wife, and they basically were counseling them. And literally at one point, the pastor and the wife tell them, like, had y'all came to us before y'all actually decided to get married, we would have told y'all not to get married. Because there was so much that I feel should always be discussed prior to marriage, prior to moving in together, prior to settling down and combining assets. There are conversations that I feel absolutely should be had. But if you have these not even rose-colored goggles on, if you have these goggles on that's just like, I just need to get married, I just need to have a family, I just need to settle down, then it's like, of course, you're not really going to see what you need to see and hear what you need to hear. If what you're looking for is marriage and a family, you're gonna find, you can find that in anybody. You know what I mean? You visibly can see that in anybody. Granted, you may be blind to a lot of shit. You may not be able to see what everybody else is saying, but if your overall goal is that is, and that's what you're pushing for, that's what you're gonna get at the end of the day. I can't say that it's gonna be a happy one. I can't say it's gonna be a happy marriage. I can't say that it's gonna be a good time, but you can find that in anybody, especially if you make enough excuses for them. The pressure put on by society for women to get married needs to come at a full stop. Nobody should ever feel less than if they're not in a relationship, if they're not married, if they don't have kids. I don't care what age you are. Like, if it's whatever's meant for you is going to be for you. Because look at it. She was in such a rush to get married and settle down and have this family that she wasted time. She wasted her own time. Granted, she was able to learn so much about herself. I genuinely believe everything happens for a reason. Be able to look back and reflect and be like, yep, I was dead wrong for this, and yep, I did this, this, and this in a situation where you were dogged the fuck out. To me, that's growth. To me, to be able to look past somebody else screwing you over and still be able to see where you were wrong in this situation, that's growth to me. And I feel like she was able to learn a lot about herself. And I feel like that, although it was a very unfortunate situation, I think that that was necessary to her journey. That's why I say I'll never judge anybody for putting up with bullshit in a relationship, because sometimes it truly is learning more about you, learning more about other people, because just as much as you are able to learn a lot when you're alone, which it's like, I know that that was another driving thing for Tisa, was that she was afraid of being alone, afraid of her marriage not working. And I know that one of the things that Tisa had expressed was being afraid of divorcing, being afraid of her marriage failing for the sake of, I guess, embarrassment of hearing other people say, I told you something was wrong with him, or I told you something was wrong. But sometimes having those, you don't want anybody there to say I told you so, but it is good to not have yes men in your corner. She also said that she did not really confide to anybody in about her relationship. So she didn't tell her friends, she didn't tell her family, she didn't tell anybody when she felt like things were seriously wrong and seriously off, which to an extent, I understand this, especially if you plan on making the relationship work. But that's why I feel like it's good to have one person, and you can find out who that person is within your family, within your friend group, that you can talk to, that won't judge you, that won't make you feel stupid or make you feel dumb, and won't judge you if you choose to stay in that relationship, but will also give you facts and ask you the right questions that'll lead you to the right answers. I got my person. Shout out Deja. Okay, you can come to this person and you can tell them, hey, this is what's going on, and whatever you decide to do, they won't judge you for it. They'll help you basically get clarity on the situation. I understand not wanting to tell family members, because that's something that I've messed up on in the past with relationships, where it could be a misunderstanding or a mistake or something that can be fixed and something that can be worked on. But if your family's like my family, as soon as they hear that my significant other has screwed me over in any way, that significant other is canceled. That significant other is done. So I do understand that to an extent, to not overshare, you know what I mean? Just because whenever, for example, in the relationship that I was in, when I did confide in everything, or confided in my family about everything that was going on in the relationship, the bad, and whenever the good came, it was difficult for them to accept the good because they couldn't get the bad out of their head. But the reality of the situation is, there are relationships, all relationships are going to have ups and downs. You know, it's just sometimes not everybody needs to know every little detail about the downs, because if they hear about that, then, you know, and they're riding for you and they're rooting for you, and all they hear is, oh, they said what? They did what? It could be difficult to try to mend that relationship once that particular issue is resolved. So in that instance, I understand. But like, so it's like, I understand, you know what I mean? Because that's something that I've had to learn. My dad has told me that himself. He was like, don't tell us everything. He was like, you don't got to tell us everything. And so that's something in future relationships that I was able to take with me, and just kind of like, you know, have your Deja, have your person that you go to that you know is still out for your best interest, but isn't going to hold it against you should you move this way or that way. And they're also going to give you that real talk, that clarity, that, hey, you know, I get the situation, let's talk about it, let's ask the right questions to figure out, is this something that you're willing to put up with, is this something that you're willing to be involved in? But yeah, definitely get you somebody like that. I've told this girl so many crazy things about relationships, and she'll smile in these dudes' faces like I ain't say shit. And that's the type of person that you want to confide in, especially when it's day to day, regular relationship disparities. Other than that, I do feel like she should have had at least one person to confide in. Because imagine that, because you can drive yourself crazy, especially if you're the type of person that gives people the benefit of the doubt. I know I'm that type of person where I'm like, well, maybe I'm tripping, maybe I'm not making sense of the situation properly. Like I for real need another set of eyes to look at it to let me know, like, hey girl, you're overthinking, you're tripping, or hey girl, nah, you should probably look into that a little bit more. Just having somebody there to provide that additional clarity, especially when you feel that your partner isn't being honest with you. And I feel like that's something that Tisa absolutely needed in her situation, because I feel like she would have gotten to that conclusion a lot faster. But instead, she just kind of was battling her own thoughts and her own self doubts, and it kind of just prolonged the inevitable. Basically, hitting the ceiling. Like it got to a point where it what the phrase that I like to use, because I have this real bad myself, I say where you get hit in the head hard enough, it's kind of like not a metaphor. It's a saying that I use. Like, have you ever played as a kid and you're roughhousing maybe, or you play a little bit too hard and you hit your head hard enough where you're like, let me sit my ass down. I'm do my due diligence and I'm gonna sit my ass down, or I'm gonna take a step back from playtime because I have done too much now. That's what I mean when I say you get hit in the head hard enough. You see something that is so shocking, or that is so, eye opening, that you kind of wake up from your previous perception and you go, okay, nope, this is what I needed to see to want to leave this situation. So I completely forgot where I left off because I went to go play with Daphne for a minute. But on to my next point. At one point, Tisa also, she's not fully reliant on Legion for financial stability, but at one point she does get a new car and then does rely on him for the payments. And she kind of mentions how that was something that she regrets, was having to rely on him for any sort of financial I guess like dependence. Because before, if you think about it, she was paying her own bills. She had her townhouse. Before him, obviously, in the time that she lived there, she was paying for her own stuff. Like it was all dealt with. And before, when she decided to stick around when he lied the first time about not being able to get the house, or the reason why he wasn't able to get the house, she was like, yeah, having that alleviated off of my plate was a reason that I had stuck around. And not only that, she was pregnant. But in this particular instance with her new car, she was like whole full ass relying on him. Before I get into that, there was the car situation. So he had promised that he was going to buy her a new car. Now, mind you, at this point, she is under the impression that this man has money, which he basically tells her. Apparently, he has an offshore account. She's seen his bank account that's in the States, and it's again like hundreds of thousands of dollars, enough to where he was able to pay for a house cash only. Like he was able to put what is it? She used the phrase multiple times where she was able to put the cash, or he was able to provide the cash up front for a house, which obviously he lied about. That was a whole other scenario that they kept bumping into, which we'll get into that in a minute. So the car situation, Legion was like, hey, I want to get you a car because you're my wife, or you're going to be my wife, and I want you riding in this and that and the third. And so I can't remember if this was before or after they had gotten married, but they had went to test drive multiple cars only for him to essentially not get her the car. So at one point the car was going to be delivered to their townhouse, which it's now their townhouse. The lease is all in her name and stuff, but he's living there as well. And so she's working from home, waiting for him to essentially or waiting for the car to be sent to her. And so it's a luxury car. She's there all day, doesn't show up. And she's like, hey, what's going on? Like, do I need to call the dealership? He's very adamant about her not talking to the dealership. And he's like, oh, it got held up. And so it just was another instance over and over again where this kept happening. And this is a part that kind of threw me off, because there was little to no question on her end about it, where she just kind of like wanted to stop talking about it, where she was like, okay, I don't want to hear anything about a car. If I want a car, I'm going to get the car, and that's it. Like, I'm tired of the excuses. And that was the end of the story. And not like, hey, why? Okay, you said you already paid for it. You say this, and this. They're supposed to deliver the car to me. Why on earth is it not here? What happened? Like, she wasn't asking enough questions. It, like, at this point, she just kind of accepted that he was lying to her, which at that point, which is why I really wanted her to just leave. And it's like the same thing with the houses. So they found after the first house deal fell through. So basically, how that fell through, which I don't know if I went into emphasis on that enough, but basically, she found a house that she liked. He said he put the down payment on it, never did. Somebody else bought the house. And she never really confronted him about it either. So with the real estate agent in that scenario, she called them and was like, "Hey, so like, when did they buy the house?" Like, there was no possible way for him to have put a down payment on. He was like, literally, wasn't even in conversation with the necessary people to purchase the house. And so when she confronted him about it, his response had nothing to do with the house already being bought or somebody else already being interested in the house or him not really being in contact with the correct people to even purchase the house. And she knew that he lied about it and still stayed. This is why when other women are like, "I don't know who I married, I don't trust the person that I married now," it's like, unless it's like you're disregarding red flags like this, you know what I mean? But like, shit does happen all the time. Like, there's gonna be a time where things don't go 100% your way. So like I said, still in the moment, with Tisa, in certain instances, this instance not being one of them, because she knew for a fact that he was lying. There are instances where things just aren't gonna go your way, plans fall through, it's not gonna work out. So I would hate for somebody to see that and be like, "Hey, he said he made a reservation for this, but then they double booked at the restaurant. Did he lie?" I mean, like, there are things that are plausible, and then there are things that, like, where you can guess or you can infer and you can make assumptions. But in this instance, she knew for a fact that he was lying. So in the next instance, when they try to buy a house, Legion basically is like, "Yeah, we'll do the money up front. Like, we'll pay for the house cash in full, all of it cash, this, and this." They were paying for the asking price. So, for somebody that's selling a house, that is extremely ideal. So, the people that were selling the house said, their agent was like, "Okay, we want to see proof of funds. So, then we can sign papers and get this done." And Legion refused to show proof of funds until they sign the papers, which is kind of just like, just show proof of funds. Y'all have the house. It's a win-win for everybody. Just show that you have the money to pay. I mean, they're going to have to see that shit anyways. You're going to have to pay for it. You know what I mean? But he refused. So then Legion and Tisa's agent or real estate agent basically takes the hit and is like, "Okay, that's my fault. I should have had y'all do that through the agency well before we started looking for houses." So he asked for that. He's like, "I'm going to ask for that now. So then next time I could be able to vouch and say, hey, they do have proof of funds. They were able to find that. They were able to provide that to the agency, and then they were able to go from there." Sorry, if y'all hear Daphne playing with these boxes. And then they were able to go from there. So Legion again refuses to show proof of funds, and for me that is a clear red flag of he's lying about how much money he actually has. And everybody kind of knew that he was lying. It was very suspicious, very uncomfortable. Their real estate agent ends up dropping them. And so again, Tisa's in a position to kind of like push for answers. Tisa is kind of in the position to push for answers, and she kind of doesn't. She doesn't really question it. She's like, "Okay, I don't want to talk about houses until the new year. I want to get through the holidays. I don't want to talk about houses." So the proof of funds incident comes up again, and this is something that they discuss with the marriage counselor, because at this point, she's not asking for proof of funds for the sake of a house. She's like, "I want to see the proof of funds for me." And so he shows her the accounts, but he won't show her the offshore account for whatever reason. And so that becomes a discussion in their marriage counseling with the pastor and his wife. So they're discussing it, and he's like, "Because of my last relationship, I feel like I shouldn't have to show her that. Money changes people," like saying things like that, basically making it seem like somehow Tisa is gonna change up or something is gonna happen to where she sees the amount of money and she's gonna respond in a particular way. Hence, there's no offshore account, there's no money. And I feel like had she noticed this or had she thought about it, because that is like a whole other level of tricking into somebody into thinking that they're the reason things are going wrong. And my advice on that is, if you know for a fact that you've done nothing wrong and yet there's somebody that's actively trying to convince you that you are doing something wrong, that is tricky. I've been in that situation before, because, and not to say that I'm extremely self-critical, but if my partner is like, "Hey, this is this," I'm gonna listen to it. So it's like, it's very difficult for me to hold somebody's feet to the fire if their whole thing and their whole goal is to make me feel like I've done something wrong. The only reason I'm like that is because I've been in multiple relationships, and one in particular that stands out to me is I was hoed, I was played, I was dogged out, but yet there were still some instances where I could have done better and I could have grown. So it's not that I'm self-critical in a way where I'm like, I could be fucking up. But during the time in that relationship, it was easy for me to see how flawed my partner was, which was very flawed, which was very problematic. And in comparison to the shit that I was doing, obviously, their shit seemed way worse. But because their stuff was so bad, it made it difficult for me to see what issues I was having as an individual and as a partner during that time. And like, although, they were problematic in themselves, I was still not as perfect as I thought I was in the situation. So anytime I'm in a relationship and my partner is like, hey, I kind of feel like this, ooh, I'm all ears, because I'm like, there is something that you may not be seeing. There's things that you find out about yourself when you're in a relationship that could be super eye-opening to you, things that you don't even realize. You could be moving with the best intention and still not realize that some of the things that you may be doing can be problematic. And so that's why I felt for her too, because, like I said, she was really doubting herself in a lot of these situations, but there were blatant ones where it's like, okay, you got to put your foot down and be like, you are actually the problem. You are the one that's causing the issues here, and I should leave. And if at any point I feel like I'm being crazy in a relationship and I'm tripping in the relationship and I feel like I'm doing too much, I still leave the relationship. Even if I know it is the other person, but there's still that ounce of doubt that like, damn, maybe I'm tripping. I feel like that's still enough for you to leave. That's still enough for you to leave the relationship, because obviously you are not healed enough to be in that relationship. So regardless if it's them or you, if you are experiencing extreme doubt, whether it be of yourself or your partner, it's time to take a step back and reflect on what that is. Reflect on, hey, is this me tripping? Hey, is this them tripping? What is the situation here? Okay, but yeah, so it's like, even if you're experiencing that much self-doubt in a situation, there is a time still for you to leave. Um, just because obviously you're not healed enough to even be able to decipher for yourself your actions and somebody else's actions, and you're getting mixed up who's in the wrong, who's in the right. That for me is also a clear sign to take a step back. But like I said, that's just like my little side note, my little TED talk, my little advice on that type of situation in particular, as far as gaslighting goes. But bless her heart, there was just so much that she was going through during that time. And I kind of just feel like women or just people in general should listen to the story, listen to it on like, you know, 5 times speed, or listen to somebody else give a better summary than what I'm giving, probably that's more chronological. My biggest takeaway though was that he lied about everything, and she still pushed through despite that instinct of her telling her that there was something wrong in this relationship, for the sake of marriage, family, the whole 9 yards. And once again, it's not to bash her or to judge her, because like I said, I'm pretty sure everybody has had a situation like that where everybody has had a situation like that where they've underestimated the person that they were with. They stayed in a relationship that they should not have been in for a pinch too long, where now their sanity is being questioned. Because I feel, had she went with her initial instinct of, or not even went with it, she knew that he was lying very early on. It was just, I understand the timing of her pregnancy and the timing of everything just did not seem to work out in the favor of her taking a step back. But the right thing to do isn't always the easiest thing to do. Another important thing, which is something that I look at as well, is meeting somebody's family. Because had she met his family much sooner, which I completely understand, it was during the pandemic, but there is Zoom, there is Skype, there's video calls. It's important to meet somebody's family, so then you're able to kind of get an idea of who they are, of the people that essentially know them the best, or that have seen the most of them, have been there since they were a kid, since birth, who have seen the ins and outs of this person before they met you. And I think that that's extremely important, because that, honestly, had she met them sooner, that was the key to every question that she had and everything that she was questioning and wondering up until their divorce. But everything timed out how it was supposed to timed out. I'm sure he wasn't going to make it easy for her to meet his family, just because of the extent at what he was lying at, but also the things that she was choosing to be blind to. The mix of those two things, like, she probably was never going to meet his family. But like I said, it really is just a matter of not being afraid to be alone. I feel like being alone and I feel like being alone, I get it. I'm not saying being alone is the tits. Everybody wants to be alone. Everybody should be alone. Like, that's not what I'm getting at all. I feel like no matter where you are in life, be it in a relationship or by yourself, you're still growing, you're still learning. Nothing has stopped, nothing has paused just because you're alone. However, I do feel like if you got to choose between being in a relationship where you're confused, you're being deceived, you're being lied to, you're knowingly being lied to, and you have a choice between that and being alone, go with being alone, obviously, because now, bless her heart, Tisa probably has all sorts of trust issues and all sorts of confusion surrounding dating that she could have otherwise avoided had she acted on finding out that he was lying to her. There are red flags that I feel like that we put up with. There are red flags that I feel like we ignore for the sake of being in a relationship. I just feel like lying being one of those red flags is the most terrifying one because you never know what the truth is. You never know what you're getting. You don't know what you're getting. You don't know what the truth is. You don't know what lying is. That to me is a hard red flag and a hard fucking no. Like I said, red flags in regard to like, oh, he doesn't make the bed every morning. Like, there are little red flags that can be overlooked, and then there are huge ones where it's like there's absolutely no way that you should be in this position because this is not going to end well in the long run. I couldn't imagine being in a relationship where somebody is actively lying to me and I'm aware and decide to stay. That for me is the biggest red flag, and the one for me that there's no looking over it, there's no bypassing it, there's no getting past that. Just because I feel like myself, I'm already a paranoid person. I watch a lot of true crime. I'm already convinced. You know what I mean? All you gotta do is one wrong thing, and I'm like, you are capable. And so for me, lying puts you in the shitty position of questioning everything, of questioning when somebody's telling the truth, the questioning when somebody is being dishonest. For her to actively stay in a situation where, like I said, she had proof that he was lying and had lied to her about something big enough to where ain't no way. There should have been no reason for her to want to stay in that situation. There should have been no reason for her to overlook that. Any logical reason. I get the reasoning that she had of, okay, well, I'm carrying his child, my bills are paid. So it's like, I get that reasoning, but for the reason of actually being in a functional relationship, that is not it. Lying is just something that you should never ever tolerate, especially if it's to that degree. Because I don't know how she lasted all that time with him without being completely terrified. Because for me, big or small, usually big, if somebody's lying about something that's substantial enough for me to be like, okay, this makes me nervous, and it's not somebody lying about like an insecurity or where they were born, or like not where they were born, but like what kind of class they come from, what kind of background their family has. If it's not something like that, like I said, that's based around an insecurity where it's like they're not selling a lie, they're selling the life that they wish that they had growing up or something like it's a harmless lie. It's a lie, no doubt, but the intention behind it isn't to deceive you in a very negative, harmful way, but it's more so to deceive themselves into being like, yeah, I had a great family growing up. I had a great everything growing up. And you know what I mean? Like things, lies like that, I can somewhat jive with. It is, it's still a lie at the end of the day. You still shouldn't do that to your partner. However, it's not the kind that she was dealing with. And the kind that she was dealing with is fucking scary. Like, he literally could have been capable of so much more. And she's lucky that all he did was lie and waste her time. Because when I tell you things could have escalated to a point, she could have had a Ted Bundy situation. Ted Bundy lied to everybody, including his wife, about his murders. And it's like, that type of a liar is scary to me because it's like, what are we doing? And not only that, even if it is a small lie or a lie where I can't think of a reason to where I would be like, okay, I understand. That's still terrifying to me, because how do you trust anything that person says? That would drive me insane, the whole relationship. Because how is it that you're like, oh, I already know he's gonna lie? Proves you right, does lie. You already know the truth. You've already figured it out. You've already established that this man was going to lie to you, and then he did. I don't know. Well, that's all that I have for you today. If you've ever been in a situation like this or have any opinions about the story in a whole, share down below in the comment section with us. And I hope you have an amazing day, an amazing weekend or weekday or whenever I decide to post. But okay, bye.